Now, the UN Environmental Programme is hosting a conference in Geneva aimed at clinching a landmark treaty to combat plastic pollution. Organizers are aware the negotiations will not be easy, but they insist a deal is within reach. Plastic pollution is so ubiquitous that microplastics have been found on the highest mountain peaks, in the deepest ocean trenches, and even found in the human body. We can now bring in Bethanie Carney Almroth, professor in the Department of Biological and Environmental Sciences at the University of Gothenburg. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Why should plastic pollution be a concern for all of us?
Well, you mentioned it a little bit in your opening. Plastic pollution is found on every part of the entire globe in all of our environments, including the human body. And not only is the planet contaminated, but plastic is causing harm. It's causing harm in the environment. It's causing harm in humans. People are exposed across the entire life cycle. And the crisis has become existential for some people and countries in the world today.
What are some of the health risks with plastic pollution?
One of the most well-established health risks from direct exposure is exposure to chemicals. There are more than 16,000 chemicals present or used in plastics. We know that 4,200 of those have hazardous properties and more than 10,000 lack data. And of those that we know something about, we know that they can be associated with increased cancer risks, with disruptions in hormone systems, with metabolic disorders, with reproductive disorders. So there are well-documented health impacts of chemicals in plastics. But plastics can also have indirect effects. They're destabilizing the earth system, they're impacting the environment, they can affect food security, they can lead to increased flooding. And the fact that plastics are made from fossil fuels ties them very closely to the climate crisis that we're also facing.
Why do you think it's so difficult to reach an agreement to combat plastic pollution when, as you said, all countries and everyone is affected?
There's a few reasons for that. One is that plastic's life cycle is very complex, and plastics as materials are very complex. It's not one thing, but rather thousands and thousands of things. And the plastics life cycle begins with extraction and production. That's very closely tied to the fossil fuel industry. Since 99% of plastics are made from fossil fuels. It involves all of these chemicals that I just mentioned. These are transported across the world. It involves trade, it involves production of products that we use in every part of our lives. Plastics are quite literally ubiquitous in all that we do. So there's no one simple solution. We will need many solutions. And there are a lot of different contentious ideas about what should be included in this treaty, what its scope should be, whether or not we should be looking at production and chemicals and so on.
Are there certain age groups who are more susceptible to the risk of plastics?
We do know that children are more vulnerable than adults. They have developing hormone systems and organ systems. We know that chemical exposure and microplastic exposure occurs already in utero. So humans are exposed throughout literally their entire lives from before the moment that they're born. And we know that early exposure to a lot of chemicals can have effects that are seen first later in life.
And from a public health perspective, how dangerous is plastic pollution versus other environmental risks?
That's a difficult question to answer, and I can't say that I have a direct answer to that, but I can say that there are ties between plastics and a lot of other public health issues that we're facing. So one would be air pollution. Plastics during their production phase contribute to the release of greenhouse gases, but they're commonly incinerated in the waste phase, and incineration might occur in plants that are more regulated, but open burning and uncontrolled burning is also very, very common, and this leads to releases of particulate matter, of micro nanoplastics into the air, but also of dangerous chemicals that become aerosolized, things like dioxins, which are very cancerogenic. So people can be exposed to these again during the entire life cycle. But plastics are, as I'm explaining, tied to a lot of other health crises. We also see plastics contributing to biodiversity changes with invasive species. There's new microbial organisms that are growing on the surface of plastics, including human pathogens. So there's a lot of interconnections between plastics pollution and other public health crises.
Uh, when it comes to plastics, you mentioned that it's tied to the fossil fuel industry. Is that why the lobby is so immense to take on?
Yeah, the petrochemical fossil fuels lobbyists and interest organizations are here, and they have vested interests in this treaty. Of course, fossil fuels are important with important ties to economies, and these companies themselves also have vested economic interest in the continued production of plastics and petrochemicals. So there's definitely a factor in why they are here.
Indeed. Bethanie Carney Almroth, thank you so much for joining us on the program this evening.
Thank you.